Hello everyone and welcome to the first part of the Highpoly here in this tutorial. So we've got everything already set in place. We have a very solid mid-poly here that we're going to be sort of working through, bringing into Zbrush, polishing up. If you're just starting to watch this at this stage, there's actually a Maya file that you can dive into that'll bring you directly to this point. And you can follow along from there. So what we're going to be doing is we're taking this, we're going to be properly setting everything up, quickly bringing it over into Zbrush, polishing it up and doing a whole polish pass on every single piece. Then we'll add a little bit more specific damage and stuff like that. But this whole phase should be quite a lot quicker than what we did previously. We've actually set up pretty much everything we need to, so running it through Zbrush won't take too long. And we'll be going over a bunch of different tips and tricks and methods as to how we're going to go about doing all of that. Before we dive into that too much, this frame, we actually sort of went through it a little bit more of a different style compared to everything else. Since this was kind of the first thing we set up, we didn't do it as detailed as everything else. For example, these bolts here, if we go to our reference, actually have their own specific shape. We never really set that up. We just sort of placed them in there. So we'll just quickly knock those guys out. And we'll continue along just because, yeah, we just didn't do that off the start, but we really should have. So we already have everything lined up pretty much. We're just going to be cutting holes and setting that up and then actually modeling the screws, and we'll bring it all into Zbrush. Another thing that I want to do is I really want to round out these corners a little bit and round out some of the shapes in general. The reason I say that is because when we run it through Zbrush, it'll be giving us a nice polish, but the more round something is, the smoother the polish is going to pick it up quickly. So when we see something like this edge doesn't have as much of a smooth transition as this. So this will get over smooth compared to this. We just got to make sure it's all staying relatively even. Let me just, there we go. It was just showing where my UV seams were because I have my editor open in the other window. Just turn that off. So let's go ahead and we'll start with these two, and then we'll round everything out, and then we'll bring it into Zbrush, and we'll end up probably bringing in a couple pieces into Zbrush in this section. You'll see pretty quickly it's a pretty fast process. So yeah, let's start with these guys. So we already have the size of them. That's pretty nice. If we look at the reference, kind of seems like a ring with a line cut out. They all seem to be a little different. But I think that's kind of the main gist of it, is like a cylinder with a line cut out of it and then something poking through. I'm going to go off of this style where it's kind of like a Pokeball almost. So yeah, let's do that. I'm going to grab this guy, I'm going to smart duplicate, and we can center our pivot on that guy. This is looking a little low poly for me, so I'm going to select all these edges and hit Control B to bevel, and just double up pretty much all the edges there. We're going to have to go ahead now and cut a line through. Kind of seems like we got lucky, and we can just cut across like so, and it seems to be doing quite fine. The thickness seems about right, and the poly count is allowing us to do so, so I'm just going for this shape. With Control-Shift-X, I can get back to my cut tool and cut a line roughly there. And if we remove these guys, we can then extrude this back by holding Shift on these edges and dragging. Vertex, snap that in. Can bridge these two edges down by Shift right click, dragging down to bridge. And then let's make sure we just merge all those vertices together. Let's grab this ring here, minus these two edges, and just snap these back with a vertex snap. Do the same down here, just so we can eliminate all these edges that we don't need. Merge all those guys, and we're pretty much at the shape. We do have to cut a hole out through the middle, so we can just do that with a Boolean operation. So Booleans are always easiest when, if you're cutting a cylinder out of a cylinder or something like that, they have the same amount of edges, just so you can connect them up a lot easier. So what I'm going to do is just smart duplicate face once again, bring this guy out. We can just do what we did before, where we bevel it. I'm going to push this guy in, make it a bit longer, try and get that size. Seems to be about there. Freeze transforms and delete history on everything. Do a pretty standard Boolean, selecting our main mesh, shift selecting our Boolean mesh. It's on difference, and we can just delete history and base object, or I might want to shrink this down a little bit. I can select the Boolean mesh and scale it in. Bit more like so, and there we go. So now I can put that back, and that's going to be the shape we're going for. There is this sort of cylinder in there, so we can set that up just like we've been doing with everything else. So let's go ahead and bevel this guy. Can scale him down, fit it in there. It seems to be poking through, so we can have it coming through like that. This one I'm just going to, might as well just snap it back there. But yeah, it's poking through a little bit, and it seems to be rounded. So let's go ahead and bevel that face on the top. Maybe like a 0.15. Yeah, and that's getting the shape pretty good. Just so we can quickly remember, these are two different shapes. I'm going to color this one red, just so I remember that it's separated. We can now slap these guys back onto where they're supposed to be. A really quick way to do that, of course, is to just poke face on these, so we have a place to quickly snap them to. Shift right click will get us to that menu. And I'm just going to group them for now with Control G, just so I can select them both at the same time. Center pivot. Move the pivot to the back. All right, snap one there. Duplicate the group. And just sort of place these guys all over. It's nice to group them like this, just because I can move both these pieces and duplicate them at once without any weird sort of rotation errors or anything like that. Slap those all around. And then if we go back to this mesh, we can delete these bolts. And this one I'm actually just going to drag to the side, so we're going to need it for Boolean purposes in just a second. One thing I want to do really quick is, since these appear to be some sort of screws or something like that, you'll never have them all be perfectly straight. So just give them a bit of a random rotation. Something along those lines. But yeah, we're going to want a hole to be cut through. Just so we get a bit of a more consistent cut. It kind of seems like the cut should be based off of these holes actually, or these things puncturing it, because these red parts are a bit smaller. So I believe these red parts are supposed to be the continuation of these longer pipes. So I might actually just get rid of this altogether. So what I can do with these two is duplicate them. Let's isolate them. We don't need any of this extra stuff if we're just Boolean or doing a Boolean. So I'm going to select everything, deselect, deselect the middle. Are these not? These aren't attached. Okay. But that one is. Weird. I don't know why I set it up that way. So the back one's fine. This is such a weird setup. Let's just delete these so we just have plain cylinders. This is pretty easy to fix anyways. I can just scale that in. Oh, the size is different. Okay, I can see why I did this. Delete that middle. And just squash that in. Can shift right click, merge vertices. And I don't think they actually merged. Merge vertices, maybe turn that up a little bit. Right, and now we can delete that. Cool. So I want these two to be the same mesh. I can just shift right click, combine. Now if we isolate these two guys, I want these to actually puncture all the way through. If we're doing a Boolean, we want our meshes to be closed off to prevent any weird artifacting. So let's fill hole. Can freeze, transform, delete history on these guys, and we can once again bring up our Bool manager. Make sure it's on difference, new Boolean operation, and clean up, delete history and base objects. Got to make sure we bridge these over. Shift right click bridge. Not the same number of edges. Okay, it's because we have these things connecting and causing a few weird issues. Let's make sure we close these off. And this kind of hole we'll never actually see, but it's just for normal map information when we're beveling to get a bit more of a proper polish. You'll see it kind of dipping in a little bit from the inside, which is nice. Very, very subtle detail, but it adds to the believability, and that's why we're pretty much constructing this as it would be in real life, just to maximize our ability to make it look realistic. Merge vertices. We should be able to bridge these across now. Yep. And we'll have to do the same on this side. Okay, this one works. I'm going to assume the other one doesn't. But in the meantime, we can just connect these guys. Okay. And then yeah, it's because there's extra edges here because these guys aren't connecting properly. But we should be able to bridge that across just fine. Cool. So that's that. Interesting. I have a hole. I have a few holes. Whoa, okay. This must have been when I was experimenting yesterday with how this stuff was going to work. I'll just quickly clean this up. I'm going to bridge that across. Let's see. Can bridge this. Surprised I overlooked this yesterday. I'm sorry. Shift right click bridge. Equal number of. Oh, right. So we probably shouldn't have a face on the inside here if we're trying to bridge it over. This is weird because this is connecting at the top here, but then it's angled in. Which means I'll probably have to pull this in a little bit. I don't like that too much, but we'll see how it looks when we get to the Highpoly. I think if I snap that there, technically it's fine. And I can merge that. And that should let me bridge now. Yep. Same with this, I should be able to bridge down. Should be able to bridge across. Bridge down, okay, that's working. Now I'm going to want to extrude this out. And do something like this, because I want this guy to have room here. I can actually snap this all the way to the end. And we're almost there. If I bridge this across, I can snap this here. I can snap this here. I can merge my verts, and then connect that there. This is still being finicky. I don't like how when I select this loop, it's picking up these edges. It means something in here isn't right. I wonder if simply just merging everything is going to solve anything. Maybe it's just an edge on top of an edge. Doesn't seem like it. I'm gonna delete all of these for now. So yeah, that should select this whole group. That makes sense. If I bring this over, I can then merge that edge down into a vertice, connect that. Okay, so now it's just this, which is how we want it. Bridge. This is still just here. And we can fill that hole, and that should do it. Okay. Interesting. I knew I was having issues with that earlier. And we have an open face here. I knew I was having issues with that earlier, but I didn't realize I had deleted some faces while I was sort of investigating it. I feel like these long skinny triangles typically cause issues, so I'm wondering if I should just thin this out a little bit to give it some more breathing room. And yeah, this, not the biggest fan of how this turned out, but I suppose now that it's attached, I can just do that. Yeah, that works. Pretty good. Okay. Alrighty, let's merge everything. And yeah, the only thing we have left to do, oh man. I guess some faces just got deleted when we did the Boolean. I'm guessing that's it, because there's no way I would have overlooked something like that. Interesting. Extrude that out, merge edges to center. It's a quick way to sort of get a triangle that you can weld into places. I'm thinking that this occurred because there's a lot of this sort of geometry that essentially too many n-gons is kind of the short answer. Too many faces that don't have proper connections, causing weird issues. I'm gonna actually delete these because it's going to recognize this all as one whole, right? Yep. Let's go ahead and bridge this across. It'll recognize that as a single hole. We can fill hole. The worst thing you can have happen is when you trying to select a open sort of hole like this, and it starts selecting edges that don't belong to the hole. That's all I'm really trying to prevent. Let's just go ahead and start bridging like that, and then just fill hole and fill hole. And then just to be safe, let's just close off a few more of these so we don't have to worry about them later on. Any holes on this side? Doesn't seem to be like that. Okay. Cool. So with that set up, let's go ahead and save this actually, just in case, we go back and the mesh is kind of corrupted or something like that. It doesn't seem to be that way, probably just because of over-utilizing the Boolean feature without cleaning up. But yeah, with that being said, let's save this mesh, and it'll be easier to move forward with sort of like a more confidence that our mesh isn't going to randomly explode, I guess. All right, let's go and do a quick little pass on smoothing everything out. Some of the areas that I think should probably be smoother before we bring it into ZBrush. First thing is these guys. Ours is just a 90-degree angle. I'd like to have it softened out a little bit more, just so I don't have to rely on ZBrush polishing to do that. Polishing is more for like these smooth transitions here, or like this soft edge, or just like subtle, really soft edges like that. I don't want to have to crank it up to do something like that and risk ruining everything else. Yeah, like these very soft edges are nice, but that's not the same tool I want to use for something like that. So let's just do a very basic, just a bevel. With this, I ended up welding a bunch of vertices in off camera after the sort of blockout phase. There was just like edges hanging here with like some connected. I just merged them all in with vertex snapping. Very, very simple. And I'm just going to actually make sure I can see everything. Hit Control B. And I'm going to crank up the segments to 4, and I want it to be 4 so I have 1 in the middle. I want like 2 to the sides, and just any number where I'm going to have a middle one, just so it's easier to work with later on. Like say I want to get rid of some geo, I can just cut out these 2 edge loops and I'll have main ones and a center one still. It's important to sort of have that center one. But I'm pretty happy with that. It's looking good. I did want to round out the geo in these areas here, just because they are a little bit low poly, to be honest. So let's just get that on both sides. I don't want to crank it too crazy, but it's just so that it's more consistent with everything else. Let's just Control B. Yeah, and it's just a lot smoother. I have a lot more confidence in that. can just sort of vertex snap some of these guys in. Merge them. Suppose we also have these ones here. And then there's only one more area we should probably end up rounding. It's interesting how this didn't round. In fact, it looks kind of sharp. Weird. Did I not select that? Okay, I'll just bevel it anyways. Before I do that, should I have been selecting the whole loop? Probably. Okay, let's undo all that beveling. Alright, so what I failed to do was I just selected the ends. It probably would have made more sense to select the whole loop and then just like deselect what's in the middle. This way the bevel continues all the way to the inner silhouette. I just don't want it to go past that. Like this, for example, it's a big no-no. I just want it to be concealed on the silhouette and not go past that. Okay, let's get the same selections on this side. Just deselecting everything that isn't just on the edge. Probably quite a bit in here. Okay, Control B. Get rid of that. It seems like something's bottlenecking it from beveling too much. Probably these guys. Yep. So we can crank that up a little bit, just get it all smooth. Looking good on this side as well. A lot smoother. I'm gonna move forward with that. And then the last thing is like, yeah, how non-soft these areas are. So if I bevel them, yeah, okay. I'm just making sure it'll let me do it. Grab those guys. I definitely should have just cranked it up from the start, because now we're gonna have to have a decent amount of kind of weird cleanup, because we have like these triangles. We're gonna have triangles in the triangles. But they shouldn't really take that long. Okay. Cool. So this guy's now ready for Zbrush, or at least ready for us to get him ready for Zbrush, if that makes sense. So how are we doing this? At the very, very start of this course, I did a quick little demo, and I also explained how to get all of our plugins set up. And we're going to have to do just that. Or we're going to have to be utilizing just that. I have all my plugins already set up. And one of the ones that I go over is this guy. He shows all of your hard edges. If I look through this mesh, it's pretty much how I want it to be. In the sense that I want hard edges on all these sort of like 90-degree transitions. Pretty much what the hard edges are saying is anywhere that there's a hard edge, we're going to be polishing and targeting these specific areas, because what we're going to do is we have a plugin here in Maya, a script that pretty much says wherever there's a hard edge, cut that off and give it a different UV shell. These are going to look a little messed up right now. A different UV shell. And then when we bring it back into ZBrush, each UV shell is going to get a polygroup, and then the polygroups where they're different is going to suggest where we're going to be smoothing, which may seem like a lot, but it'll make a lot more sense in just a second. So essentially, if we go through this and we just hit auto smooth, maybe based on 40 degrees, it'll do a pretty good job. As you can see, like we had a bunch of hard edges there that were cleaned up. We pretty much only have hard edges on those harsh cuts. This is like an example of something I'd want to fix where I don't really want a hard edge there, so I would just soften that edge. Same with there. And we're just going to sort of comb over the model and clean up any places we don't want hard edges. Since we did like an auto soften, it's pretty safe to assume that everything is going to be the same on both sides. So I'm just going to check these areas. And like here's a good example. Like I want to keep this hard because I want this transition from this piece to this piece to be softer. All these guys are going to get the treatment. It's looking good. I might want to harden that just to ensure this gets a lot of smoothing where it's needed. That's that's soft. That should be soft. This all looks good. I like how that's just a hard line there. Same on this side. Targeting softness here. Maybe just make this hard, sort of connect it all. Same with that one. It's worth poking my camera in here. Everything seems to be in order. That's looking good. Right, so what can we do with this? Like I said, it has a lot to do with our UVs. Mine look very weird because I was doing some experimenting yesterday. But what we can do is we can kind of grab all of our faces and hit, mine is set to this checker, but this is going to be the script that says break up, essentially break up your UV shells based on hard edges. So if I click that, it says non-manifold geo. I expected something like that. But essentially we have each of our hard edge groups is a different shell, which is what we want. Now the issue is, like I said, there's non-manifold geo, which is essentially geometry that isn't exactly what it's supposed to be. It's essentially saying that the geo is kind of messed up, probably because of all the booleans we were doing. And when you have non-manifold geometry, it's not going to lay this out. Like An easy way to get this looking kind of organized would have been to go to modify, layout, but it's probably going to pop up down here saying non-manifold geo. It's not going to lay out properly. Let's just see. It's kind of hard to see exactly what's happening. Oh, it's actually going for it. Okay. Interesting. Normally it wouldn't let us do something like that. But the reason I'm laying this out is because even though we've broken this all up into the groups based on the hard edges, I find that sometimes it's a little bit finicky inside of Zbrush, where even if you break them up, if the shells are overlapping each other, it sometimes doesn't pick up that they're different shells. So they actually have to be like properly separated within the UV editor inside of Maya. And by using a layout, all that's essentially doing is just sort of spreading everything out so nothing is overlapping. By default, this will do that, but when there's non-manifold geometry, like on this guy, what it's going to be doing is preventing the layout option. It'll still break it up, but it just won't lay it out. So hopefully, if everything goes smoothly, in most cases we're not going to have to do this step. But since this one has that sort of wacky geo that we're going to have to clean up in the low poly stage, we're going to have to go through and do an actual modify layout to spread it all out. So won't have to be doing this for the rest of them, hopefully. I'm sure we'll have a couple more. And yeah, these UVs look atrocious, but they're laid out properly, just separating everything pretty much. There's a few areas where it's like this is overlapping with a couple things. It's really not that big of a deal. I'm just going to move it out of the way just because to keep things consistent. So if I double click the hard edges as we set it up before in the first part, I can take that view off. I can bring everything back, and we can actually hit this button here, and this is going to be what sends it over to Zbrush. This guy selected, hit this. It's sending this mesh out into this specific folder we specified in the second video in this tutorial. It's naming it temp_01.opj. I'm going to close out of this, go into Zbrush. We're going to need to import it now. So instead of going to like a load tool or import OPJ or anything, all we're going to do is just grab something from a scene here, drag it in, hit edit so we can start manipulating it. And then these custom buttons we put in, the OPJ out and OPJ in, is going to sort of let us bridge between Zbrush and Maya really quickly. So OPJ in is going to essentially take whatever subtool you have selected here and replace it with the object we exported from Maya. In this case, the typewriter, or at least this section of the typewriter. Looking pretty good. We also actually added this metal material, which is going to make it a lot easier for us to see sort of hard edges, soft edges, polishing and stuff like that, just because it's shinier. So we added this at the very start. I'm just going to be bringing that in just so we can sort of see things a little bit more clearly. And yeah, let's start going ahead and polishing this guy up. There's definitely a few things to keep in mind with this. If this is your first time using Zbrush, I'm going to recommend that you at least have the basic knowledge of sort of maneuvering the camera and basics of the layout and stuff like that. We're not going to be doing anything too crazy. Essentially, all we're doing is bringing stuff in, dynameshing it, polishing it, and then we'll probably be doing some little edge damage in a different pass near the end. So nothing too crazy. We've pretty much set everything up that we need to set up in Maya already. But I would still recommend having a very basic knowledge, maybe watching a couple intro to ZBrush tutorials. So anyways, moving forward, we can hit Shift F, if we can see our wireframe here. At the start, we set up this custom toolbar. What I'm going to be hitting is auto groups with UVs. Now, what this is doing here is essentially we set up all our different UV shells, right? What this is doing is saying that each UV shell is going to get its own group. Each group has a different color. And this is useful because if we were to do like mask by feature groups. This is a really bad example because there's no geometry, but you would see like perfect little lines in between all of our different groups that are being masked out, and we can sort of target certain areas with things like polishes and isolating certain areas. So let's go ahead and start doing a real example of that. I'm going to go to geometry. I'm going to go to the Dynamesh section, and what Dynamesh is doing is essentially taking this geometry and adding an even layer of polygons all across it. You can hit divide a bunch. Maybe I won't do it that way. I'll turn smooth off so it stays the same shape. But you can hit divide a bunch and then say like delete lower, and it's going to add a lot more geometry here. But as you can see, like some areas have a lot more geo than others, and that's because it's just taking the existing geo and sort of subdividing it, which can be good in some cases, but we don't want that, because if we do Dynamesh, it'll evenly spread geometry all the way across. And this is important so we can sculpt areas and keep the quality consistent. It's not like some areas are going to be super high quality like here. Well, this has less geo and there's less ability to sort of sculpt on it. So if we hit Dynamesh, you can see it's an even distribution of polygons. The resolution sort of determines how many polygons we have, and we can see that up here. So if I crank it up, let's try something like around 700. This might take a little bit of time, but as you can see, we're at 1 million now. It's a lot denser. And if I hit Shift F to turn off of my wireframe, you can start sculpting things, chipping damage away, etc., etc. But we can also, and this is probably going to look bad, this is just an example, but we can also start polishing. Polish by features, start to smooth everything out. And then like a standard polish. And as you can see, we're starting to get that soft, typewriter-y look that we wanted. Now those were just pretty basic examples. What I actually want to do with this is Dynamesh it a little bit more. I'm probably going to bring it to like 850. I feel like with this, 1 million might not be enough, so I'm going to hit Dynamesh. Crank it up to about 1.5 million. And let's experiment with polishing. So one thing I might have to do is mask out all these little holes, just because this polish by features might be a little bit too much for these to handle. It'll take these giant shapes and soften them out pretty well, but it might just completely overpower some of these smaller ones. So each polish feature has 2 options. They have kind of different looks by when you click these things, the little dots. For the polish by features, we're going to want it to be the circle or the O rather than just the dot. So I'm just going to experiment with this and maybe do 25%, which is making everything look really, really nice. Definitely a fan of how that's turning out. And even these holes, they're looking all right, but you can see in areas like this where it's just completely overpowered it. And that's because there's just not enough geo going on here. So I'm thinking I might even want to Dynamesh it more. Let's crank it to 1,000. The other good thing about this workflow is since everything's in parts, say we completely ruin something because everything's so organic and fluffy, we can always just go back and more or less really, really quickly fix it by just replacing it. So I brought the geo up to about 2 mil. I want to see if polishing is going to affect that area. So if I do like a 30, it's making everything else look really nice. $10 kind of seems to be a little bit better, to be honest. I think the issue with this is it's too shallow. I want to see other angles really quickly. Yeah, some of these more shallow ones are starting to have problems, but you're starting to see also we get this nice little almost lip around everything, which is cool because it's all just going to be baked down anyways. But what this makes me want to do is actually bring this back into Maya and just really quickly take a lot of these holes and just push them in a little bit further. Because this isn't going to affect any of the like screw placement or anything like that. All it's going to do is ensure that we kind of just have more room to add more geo to stabilize it all. So I'm just sort of pushing these in, going into wireframe, making sure I'm not pushing it past their boundaries. Because yeah, you see the biggest issue is with this guy, and it has a very, very shallow cut. So I can just push that in a bit more. Same with this one. This guy was looking pretty good, but it doesn't hurt to do something like that. Those two are cutting all the way through, but this one isn't, so I'm gonna push that in. I also might want to bring that up. You don't want anything too close to the edges. This is another great example of that. Push that in more. And this isn't actually affecting our sort of UV groups or anything like that either. So we can just do this and export it immediately with almost no repercussions whatsoever. Okay, that should be all of them. This guy, I think I could push in more as well. We'll just have to remember that we adjusted 2 screw placements. Make that 3. Yeah, we adjusted these, so we should probably change the screw location when we bring those in, and we'll probably end up bringing those in next. Okay, that should do it. We can just export that out again, because all the hard edges are the exact same and all that kind of stuff. We can just simply hit OBJ in. It's going to replace the subtool we had selected with the one we just exported. Once again, auto groups with UVs. We can dynamesh it, the same resolution we did before. It'll take a second. Sometimes it'll do this thing where you think it crashed, but it's loading. Zbrush is pretty consistent with that stuff unless you crank this like crazy. But now we should be able to crank it to like 20. Yeah, and these areas are handling it a lot better, like this stuff. I'm a lot more confident in how it's taking these areas. So that's good. I am also noticing a very hard edge here, and it makes me think something's going on. Weird. It might just be worth polishing it Because yeah, there's these hard edges here. It's assuming, I think based on the angle, that it's not supposed to be softened out. We're getting it there and there as well. I'm going to bevel it. In order to do so, I'm going to have to get rid of those edges. And we'll put them on in just a second again. So let's select these. Okay. Just merge this all down. Merge that there. And connect these guys back up. Okay, and really quickly on this side as well. And then we can bring this back in and do the full polish pass. As you can see, like, this is about as complicated as it's going to get, because this is by far our largest piece. And even so, it's pretty quick. And I know we've spent quite a bit of time on this one part alone. The rest of this is not going to be anything like this. The rest of this is just going to be quickly getting pieces in and out. I'll probably do a quick demonstration of that after this, as to what I mean by that. But yeah, let's get this guy out now. Or I guess we should double check our hard edges. Yeah, okay. Let's get this guy out. Bring him in. Shift F to see everything. So we are getting different poly groups there now. That could be an issue, because if we select that face, we can go look at our UV editor and see it is in fact a different group. So we know by looking at our hard edges that shouldn't be the case. So all we have to do is select everything, click this, it'll map it all out into some groups. And even if we select that area, yeah, it's already keeping it consistent. We're just going to have to go to modify, layout, it'll lay it all out again. Now we can bring it into Zbrush, do our polish pass, and then I'll say, well, we'll get the screws in there as well, and that'll show you just how quickly some of these parts are going to be. This is really, like, by far the longest. Like, this first part of the chapter, in the same length that we spent to do just this one piece, we could probably get, like, the entire top done, or the entire, like, interior or something like that. You'll start to see it goes by a lot faster. Like the last part, the mid poly / block out, like that was what, 38 parts. This I'm expecting to be honestly half of that, if not less than half of that, hopefully. It would be nice to keep it that way, but there are a lot of parts, and I'm probably kind of underestimating how long that will actually take. I'm also starting to think that I should probably make each part a little bit longer, just because when I was making the last part, the amount of time I spent rendering and actually uploading those parts to Google Drive completely outweighed the amount of time I was actually just working on it. So if I was just working on more of this as I went, I could probably mitigate the amount of time I spend doing kind of that extra work. But nice, we have that broken up. We can send this off. I'm going to close that. We can obj in. Now if we auto groups, it's all one continuous group, we're not going to get that weird artifact, which is perfect. The other side is the same. I love it. Let's do our Dynamesh. That'll just take a second. Okay, nice. And now we can polish things, and I'm not scared it's going to mess anything up. Polish by features, let's just do 5% right now. You can still see some of these edges, softening it out pretty solidly though. I might want to just do small increments so it's not overpowering any areas. Something like that. We're getting these very good holes everywhere. This might not be as smooth as I'd like it to be. Same with like this area. Like if I were to crank it, it would probably take care of those areas. But as you can see, like these holes are disappearing. So what I'm probably going to do is mask out some of these more delicate areas, then do those passes, and then do separate passes on these small areas. Like for example, if I were to polish by features here, it completely destroys these holes. I don't know who that is. So holding control and clicking and dragging, I can mask out certain areas. So if I quickly mask something like this, and then I were to do polish by features, these guys wouldn't get affected, and then I can invert the mask by control clicking, and I can polish these guys like 1%. And you can see what I'm getting at. It's just a lot more controlled. So let's go ahead and kind of grab all these really small ones that might be problematic. This is a good example of one. Just masking it out, holding control. These ones, I'm debating if I should do them. I feel like I might as well. They are pretty mini. The only reason I'm hesitant is because there's this giant triangle cutting through. I kind of want that to get softened as best as it can be. But I can avoid most of it that way. I feel like there were small holes somewhere else, wasn't there, on the inside? No, they all seem pretty... Oh, there's one. Okay, let's see, because we might get... we might just have to do a pass on all the screws, to be honest. Well, we'll just have to wait and see. But if I do a polish by features and do like 5%, like these are all right. If I crank it up to like 15 though, yeah, they're still looking pretty good. The thing is, I'm used to just cranking this up to like 50 to really soften out some of these areas. And it's making a lot of it look kind of doughy, isn't it? Let's start with like 30 or 20. Let's just do 25. I think that's looking pretty good all around as far as smoothness goes. It's making these very harsh lines, but it's softening out these corners, which I like. This might not be as soft as I'd like it to be. I'm wondering why that is. Probably just because like, these aren't actually softening it out as well as I'd like it to. So I'm actually going to physically adjust these to make it softer. Just keeping it consistent on both sides. Get this out of the way. And then, honestly, I feel like I need to bevel that again. Oh, right. I have to do it all the way around. So it would look something like this. There just isn't enough geo there. So if I bevel it, crank it up, and soften it out. Much smoother that way. Just want to make sure this is all one poly group. If I select this, yep, it's all the way around, which is good. I'm assuming that one is as well. Which means this guy is good to export. And I think that's the only other problem area I saw. So if we obj in this guy, auto groups, we can even crank the Dynamesh up a little bit. Let's do like 1200. Let's see how that looks. Obviously it'll take a little bit longer to load. Excuse me, because there's more stuff being processed. Right, so now we're bordering on 3 mil. There's a chance that these guys aren't going to be affected as much if we polish this, because there's more geo. And it is looking better, but they are still shrinking by quite a bit. So I am going to mask out those areas again. But then that should probably do it for this piece. You can change the size of your brush by hitting S and changing the draw size, or using the square bracket keys kind of near the enter and backspace part of your keyboard. And just to get it to be a bit more fine. Also, wherever you click, that's going to be where the camera zooms into when you're doing your zoom. All these seem to be fine. There's going to be 2 more of those guys here because it's symmetrical. I can actually shrink that because I don't want to get the edge. And then I can't remember if we found any smaller holes on the inside anywhere? I don't think so. Anyways, we can now do our polish without messing that up. Polish white features at 10. That's looking very smooth. Let's crank it to about 15. Oh, that's the wrong polish. This is what we're going to be doing in just a second, but you'll see it gives it a nice smooth edge to everything. That's going to be what kind of pulls it all together. 15 though to kind of get rid of these harsh edges. Everything's looking pretty smooth. We can now invert our mask, do a much lighter one on these guys. Nice, and now we can do a general polish on everything. To get rid of our mask, we can just hold Control and drag off. I'm going to polish everything by 5 because it's a very subtle, nice kind of crease to everything. It kind of makes me want to keep these masks on just so I can do a larger one first. Let's see what a polish at 15 looks like. Just making everything come together very nice. Some of these areas might be over polished. I'm gonna go back. Let's start with 10. And then if we want certain areas to be softer, we can always target those. But 10 is making everything look pretty nice. We of course have these areas that we isolated. I can hit Control and click off to invert the mask. Give it a very subtle polish of like 5. That might even be too much. Let's go for like 2. And then just a polish of 1 to blend these all together. It kind of looks like that'll do it for this piece. There are actually some areas here that I think are a little problematic. Like this isn't blending as nicely as I'd like it to. So what I can manually do is if you hold Shift, that's going to be our smooth brush. You can just manually go in there and smooth it out. I'm just holding Shift and clicking and dragging on this area to buffer it out, because this material does a really good job of showing us kind of exactly where things aren't perfectly smooth. So I'm just manually softening that out. This area also needs it. Do the same thing on the other side, because you can see that kind of like triangular shape to it. I'm just holding Shift and polishing it out. This area can use it a bit too. And here as well. You just don't want to polish into the edges and actually mess up the silhouette. Just be very careful of that. So with this, what I'm going to do is mask out this area because I don't want to mess up that. But then just kind of buffer around it. And then there might be a little bit of weird artifacting. Or not artifacting, but like if I undo that, you can see there's like a harsh line because that's not polished because it was masked out. I can just very lightly go over that. So that's probably going to do it for this polishing section. I did want to really quickly though show you how fast we can get everything else in. So to do that, I'm going to show you the screws. With screws for certain parts, I'm just going to combine them all because we're going to be baking them down. We don't need a low poly. I'm not worried about anything like that. So like all of these guys, for example, I'm just going to combine into one mesh, like all the screws that are kind of being plugged into this guy. I guess first, before we do any of that, We should adjust the ones that we moved a little bit. And we moved other ones too, didn't we? We moved... There's another one we moved, did we not? It was these guys, and then there was... It wasn't these ones, was it? No, that seems to be the same. This guy, I knew I was forgetting one. But that's a different piece, so I'm not too worried about it right now. All right, let's select all of the screws. And like I said earlier, I'm just selecting the screws that are going into this piece specifically. And we'll just sort of do that as we're bringing pieces in. We'll just grab all their corresponding screws, just to keep it nice and organized that way. We also have these little guys. And then looking underneath, I don't think we have any other ones. These aren't actually puncturing in, so I'm not worried about that. So let's go ahead and do a mesh combine on these guys. Now these are all their own pieces, so I really don't care about their hard edges or their poly groups or UV borders or anything like that. So I'm literally just going to take these, export them out, and go back into Zbrush. We want to bring them in, so we can just go to Subtool. Append is going to be bringing in a different object, so I'm going to hit Append. Let's just bring in a Polymesh 3D, so it'll bring the star in. We can select that, hit OBJ in. It's going to replace that with our new mesh, and as you can see, like they're already like done pretty much. I'm still going to go through. This is just habit to auto group with UVs, but I can just go through and let's also dynamesh them maybe at like 500. Maybe not. Actually no, these screws, since they were part of a kit, they already have their geometry evenly distributed. So what I'm just going to straight up do is divide with smooth on. Delete the lower subdivisions, being the different smoothness. So you can see that they're very dense. And I can just straight up polish by features to get rid of some of the surface noise. Or a standard polish would probably do that better. Yeah, and now I can also go in and like sculpt on these. If I go to go to my brushes and do like a trim dynamic. I'm not going to do this pass now, but I can like beat up some of the parts where you might be screwing the actual bolt in with. One thing I do want to do quickly is just a pass to make sure that they're all sort of nuzzled in there properly. I guess I didn't grab that screw. But that's also a good example for something I can show you guys in just a second. These all seem to be in here really nicely, actually. Same with that one. It might have just been this guy I'm not totally content with. I'm trying to find examples to teach with right now, but let's say I think this is a bad example of a screw being in there. I don't like exactly how it's positioned, blah, blah, blah. What I can do is I can mask it, so I can hold Control, and then instead of using mask pen, which is what we've been drawing our mask with, I can change that to like mask square, or mask rectangle probably. Yeah, and select that stuff. I can hit Control and click to make sure that everything else is masked, so we're not affecting it except this screw. And I can just use these sort of move and rotate and scale tools. So if I hit move, we're going to have a gizmo somewhere in the middle, which isn't very helpful. But we can Alt-click where we want our gizmo to go. And now I can move this screw. I can rotate it. So in this case, I'm going to rotate it a little bit this way. I can also scale it like so I can see the edges a little bit better. Kind of stick it over this way a little bit. Something like that. And then when you're done, just, I like to hit edit twice, just make sure it's turned back on. Can unmask everything. And we got that in. The final thing I'm going to go over in this part is, I forgot a screw here, so I'm just going to show you how I would go about bringing that in. This guy, yeah, we didn't combine this guy, so I'm just going to straight up export him. I can just duplicate these, take another subtool, obj in. Maybe not. It looks like it's inverted for some reason. I'm going to delete that. Let me just freeze transforms and all that. Export it. Sometimes you'll find it imports it funky. I find it's way more consistent when you append, bring in a poly mesh, and then obj in. In this case, though, it still seems to be, yeah, it just looks like it's straight up backwards. Very weird. I'm going to click rotate. It looks like it's inverted even. Very weird. Let's see what we can do about that. It's weird how that's on the one that we didn't expect. I'm literally just going to steal this one. Just use a whole new one altogether. Rotate that into place. Scale it down a little. Rotate it. Freeze transforms, delete history. Let's send this guy off. Let's delete that. Append a mesh. OBJ in. And this one's working. Okay. Interesting. So with this, as I did with the other one, I'm going to simply, under geometry, divide and smooth, delete the lower, hit it with a polish to smooth it out. But then just to get everything together, what I can do is I can have these two guys beside each other, go to merge and merge down. So it'll take this and merge it down to whatever's underneath it. Hit OK. Now they're all one. So we have our case and we have our screws. So that'll do it for this part. We covered quite a bit. Right, these holes are supposed to be like that from what I remember. So that'll do it for that part. As you can see with how fast we got the screws done, everything else coming through was going to be like insanely fast. But we got a lot done in this part. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you learned something with this. And you can see how we're going to kind of go forward with this sort of method. The last thing I'm going to show you is how to save in ZBrush, because there's like 12 different ways to save. You can save your subtool, you can save your documents, but we're going to be going to File, Save As. We're going to be going to wherever you're saving all your stuff. Mine's in Typewriter tutorial. Call this ZBrush, and I'm just going to name this Highpoly _01. What this does is this is the largest sort of file that you can save at a ZBrush. It's saving all of our subtools, all of our mini documents in here, but it's keeping it all in one place. So I like to save that way. It'll probably be the most consistent for us. But anyways, this part has probably been going for quite a while, eh? An hour and 20 minutes. That's not too bad. I think I'm going to call it there. Thank you guys for watching this. In the next part, we'll be getting a ton more stuff done. I'm also, I have a lot more to share about ZBrush and different things that we can be doing. We're not going to be keeping everything in this same viewport. We'll be kind of breaking it up, and then there's a lot more we have to go over as far as getting it back into Maya afterwards. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you guys. Thank you for watching, and yeah, hopefully you'll learn something. I'll see you in the next part. See you guys.